But so
Yep.
like for you, a lot of that seems to be like this guiding principle, this guiding kind of direction. Like my main thing is like, people say like the Lord told me or God led me to this or whatever, but on I'm not saying that that's wrong, and I'm not saying that it's incorrect, but for me, like I've never experienced that.
Hmm.
I don't know what that is. And I always try and think, because there's a lot of people that say shit like that, and I think they're full of shit. I think they're
Yeah.
grifters. I'm sure you've experienced a lot of that in churches and
Yep.
stuff. They're people that are just saying shit. I think some people do it and they delude themselves and they think it. But there are people like yourself who I think are very much so grounded in reality and are over. But for me, like I've never experienced anything like that. I've had these moments where, for example, when I was at that in Michigan on the lake and having that moment where I'm like, I need to fuck. I was at a very similar kind of pivot point, like you were, and I was just like, okay, I am not happy with my life. I'm not really doing very well. My mental health and my physical health are terrible. I had an ulcer. I was losing my fucking mind. I was stressed out. My work, to be frank, just started slipping. I was making mistakes with clients. I just wasn't there. I wasn't doing well. I wanted to do well, but I just didn't have it in me. So I've had all these things. And when I'm there and I'm in Lake Michigan and I'm having these thoughts, like I do feel this pull to certain directions and things, but I don't personify that as like, God's voice. To me,
Right.
that's just like me sitting there writing it down and being like, okay, that this feels right, or this gives me energy. So my question to you is like, how do you distinguish between like God and what is just you, like your
Hmm.
intuition or your hunch or whatever? Because I've never really heard that. I've n- I I'm sure people have talked about it, but I've never heard that like clarified at all. It's almost like when I hear people talk about, God told me this or spoke to me this, it's almost like it's without it's just
Reason.
assumed. Yeah,
Hmm.
like do you know how to speak a language that I don't? Because like to me, like it's like you're speaking, Chinese, or you're speaking
Yeah.
Japanese. Like I just that doesn't register to me. So like, how would you distinguish like those two things? Because I'm really curious.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great question. How do you distinguish what you believe to be God's voice from indigestion? Let's say maybe you had some bad tacos. Is
Yeah.
when I when I think of it, especially in that sense, it just reminds me of earlier when we were talking about the love languages.
Yeah.
Is if I was beamed up, let's say the aliens exist, and they drop me off in China, and I've got to make it work, because right now all I got is my cell phone, and let's say that they took that too, is I would not understand them. And I would just hope that maybe there's somebody there that understands me. But let's say I'm way out in the rural country, they are not going to speak English out there. But I've still got to live. Is if I work at it enough, I will be able to figure out that what they're saying to me equals that they're trying to give me food, or they're telling me to watch out for that tiger that's hiding in the bushes. Eventually, if I actively work at learning that language, same thing with the love languages, right? And that's what I feel when it comes to hearing God's voice, if you equivalate it to such, is for me, is it's just been something I've worked at. I think that for people who believe and for people who don't believe, there's still this innate longing that we have this hunch that there's more to us than just our physical. I mean, we had a conversation a while ago where you talked about being in New Orleans. New Orleans is the voodoo headquarters of the world. And when you sit there and you think about that, what basis does voodoo actually stand on? They stand on that there is something outside of ourselves that we can tap into. That's where you
Sure.
see the push pin dolls and all the stuff you see in horror movies. But there's more. There's more there. We sit there and we don't have a full understanding of who we are, not even as on a personal level, but who we are even in the earthly perspective. Like there's a very interesting theory that's called the stone tape theory. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but
Yeah.
the stone
Yeah.
tape theory is something where like stones can sit there and record memory. And when you sit there and you think about that, it's like, wait, that doesn't logically to me that makes no sense. Like, why? How could a rock near some water record a memory? And maybe that's where you'll sit there and you'll see a ghost hunter show or something where there'll be the same footsteps every single night at the same time because it's on a recording, but it's not on a recording that we understand. Like a rock can actually play back music if it's done a certain way. So my my whole reason of saying all that is I look at it more than just a religious belief. I grew up in church, and a lot of people just believe that if you read the Bible, you're in church, God's going to speak to you. I look at it on a full scale of, if there is, like, if I just happen to believe that there is a spiritual realm, that there is something where I walk into a room and it just feels a little darker than another space, or I walk into a room and I'm happy there, but there's nothing different about that space than the dark space. That must mean that there's something I don't understand, even if that's electromagnetic forces, which a lot of people like to say. If that's true, why is it different? Why is there more electromagnetic energy happening in one area than another? Why is this space helping or impacting me to have darker thoughts or lighter thoughts? And for me, is I've bought in, same way I bought in with my wife. I bought in that God is real to me. So I just actively try to just, if there is a higher being out there, I just want to see if he's real, will he speak to me? And if he's speaking to me, what does it sound like? And if it sounds this way, let me just try it. Like, if he's telling me to quit the job, I'll try it. And it wasn't that first experience. There was littler things where it'd be, go all out, just go full out with your wife. There was these little experiences, and it wasn't like I was somebody who I was all in church and, God every Sunday and on Wednesday and sometimes Tuesday nights. It was, I actually hated church. I didn't go to church. Only thing I knew how to kind of do in the religious space was what I felt was talk to God. And the only way I did that was on my way to work every day. I would believe that he was in the passenger seat with me, and I would just unload on my good and my bad. And he was that father figure I didn't have. And even if we get into the existential look at it of, well, maybe he's not real. But if he's real enough to me that it stirs me to be a better person, and if he's real enough to me that it stirs me to believe that I have a father that truly cares about every aspect of me, it helps me to be a better person. It actually helps me be better in business. What does it hurt, right? So when I sit there and I lean into this voice, I talk to the wind, let's say, but I feel I get a response, then it's for me to sit there and say, okay, if the wind's responding to me, let me go see if what the wind says makes any sense. And I just try it. And I've seen it work. I've seen blessings come from my life and things happen in my life from a being that I can't see actually imparting in me. Maybe it's a pull in a certain direction. Maybe it's just my conscience, right? But every single one of those things, I just lean into it, especially if it's for my betterment, and leaning into it and just saying, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'll give it a try. And that's the same way that I've experienced the Holy Spirit, God, the universe, however people put it. For me, it's God, is actually sitting on docks, being near bodies of water. That's where I've experienced him the most, because that's, to me, if the spirit realm is real, that's where the veil between the two is the thinnest. That's where I feel the most connection and the most opportunity to have a voice from the other side, as most people call it, speak into me. And it may not be an audible voice that I hear and say, okay, you just spoke to me and told me to take a left instead of a right. It may be just this weird innate feeling that I'm supposed to try this instead of doing what I'm already doing. Does that kind of answer it? Like, I just kind of gave this big look.
It kind of does. I'm still trying to piece some things together, but yeah, I still don't know what the distinction between that like people feeling like they're getting guidance from God versus intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, I don't really see a difference, and it's interesting to see some people, like, for you it seems like it's something that you believe, but you're perhaps a little more loose, where it's just like it works for you and you choose to believe it, which I suppose is what faith really is. There's other people that I've talked to where it's like a fact to them, and that's where it starts to get like kind of difficult for me to bridge that gap, because it's like I heard in one of the episodes that I listened to with you where you talked about obedience,
Yep.
like in this surrender, and I find that so interesting. With when it comes to people of faith, a lot of the time there's this surrender, there's this submission, there's this obedience, and it's like a letting go of responsibility. And for me, like, again, it goes back to that whole like perfectionism, overworking, whatever, control I have to have control in every aspect of my life, which is why I'm an entrepreneur. And so the thought of not having that and giving that to something is like horrifying to me. But you have a very similar trajectory that I did, but it went in the opposite direction, where perhaps like obedience and surrender is um, it is cathartic for you. Like it is a release to not have to have that. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm really just kind of curious, having that all that context of your life is. I'm curious. Were your parents religious at all?